That's a Disney show that I was on called Liv and Maddie. We were in the middle of shooting episode 7. Literally, we were turning around a scene. We were turning around when they walked on stage and canceled the show. They owned the Man Chinese Theater, which was Grauman's. They bought the Chargers, and then they bought the franchise to be named, which became the Supersonics in Seattle. I was diagnosed at 15 with a version of ulcerative colitis. It was very minimal. Then I got really sick in my mid-20s. I'm not coming home with this colon. When you receive emails from like you have no idea what this did for my daughter, it gave her such hope and strength. You're like, okay, so what do I want my legacy to be?
Welcome to another episode of 90who10. I'm Jessica Entner.
And I'm Dan Eisenstein.
And today we have another Beverly alum, an actor a lot of your kids would probably know, and also possible sports connection with the San Diego, yes, I said San Diego Chargers. We have Ben King, who I just found out is a cousin of a really, really good friend of mine.
Very
Welcome,
true.
Ben.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Some people know me as Benjamin. I think that's what comes up.
You know why Benjamin?
That's what my parents. I'm named after my great-grandfather, my mother's grandfather, who was Benjamin Klein, who begat Gene Klein, who was the Chargers connection.
Yep.
Professionally, do you go by Benjamin or Ben professionally?
Benjamin.
Okay. Because, I mean, in high school, Ben King growing up. So that's
yeah, no, all my friends, it's interesting. I have a million names. When I was little, like my family called me Benji. Before I went to camp, I used to go to camp on the East Coast, like real camp, like Meatballs. The year that Meatballs came out, I went to this camp called Taconic in Western Massachusetts. And I was like, Dad, I was sitting with my dad. I'll never forget it. We're in this like big white wicker chair. I'm like, my name is too, like Benjamin is too big, and I don't really like Benji and Ben. I don't know. And he's like, well, let's think about this. Your middle name's Jason. Your last name's King. So what about BJ? BJ King. I was like, fantastic. And so if you call me Benji, I know exactly when I met you. If you call me BJ, I know exactly when and where we met. If you call me Ben, I know what era. It's really amazing. And Benjamin is sort of like throughout.
my whole life I was Danny. And then
really?
Well, not my whole life. When I was a little kid, I was Danny. And I came home one day, I want to say from kindergarten, but it might have even been from preschool. And I said, Mom, I'm Dan. And that just from that point on.
I love it.
You know, you were a couple years older than me, and you were always the nicest, the most friendliest. So I always remembered you and thought of you that way. You know, and it's funny.
Thank you for saying that.
You know, I know
That's
you've
nice
had
to hear.
success. I wasn't in contact with you. I reached out to you on Instagram, and right away you responded to me. You were like, "Yeah, let's do it." And that was You know
why I responded right away?
Yeah, what's that?
Because that recent success was like 6 years ago, and I'm an out-of-work actor right now.
That's not true.
Which we can get into at any point.
Well, let's get into it.
Thank you for saying this kind
Before we get into, let's get into some of your early life. Jessica, your grandfather was Gene Klein. He owned the San Diego Chargers. How old were you? Like, what years did he own the Chargers? Do you remember?
66 to 84.
Oh, that's a long time.
The Spanoses have owned it since. So, I mean, they've certainly owned them the longest. I think Barron, he started the team in 60, I think. And by 63, they had won an AFL championship. AFL was like better than the USFL to the NFL, but like they both played in the fall. And the idea was that, Lamar Hunt, who also owned the Kansas City Chiefs. I may have some of this backwards, but he was the commissioner of the AFL. Pete Rozelle was the commissioner of the NFL. I think Al Davis was also commissioner of the AFL for a while. we don't like to talk about him in my house. But anyway, Barron bailed out fairly quickly. He had the team for 6 years. They were in LA for a year. And then, so my grandfather was the president of a company called National General. They started off as, I think it was the Great American Insurance Company, but he had started off his life his professional life as a used car guy, and he had lots all over the valley, and he like just had a knack for knowing what people needed, and he would buy cars. And one of his slogans was drive in poor, walk out wealthy. Another one was our cars are cheaper by the pound than hamburger. He just had like this thing. I don't think he ever completed college. He may have gone for a little bit, but like he just wanted to get going. Talk about the greatest generation. I mean, he just was shot out of a cannon after he was honorably discharged. He was in the Air Force, which was then the Army Air Force. It was a branch of the Army. It wasn't its own branch. Right. He was a navigator. He couldn't fly planes because he was 6'5".
Wow.
And that's not, those cockpits are not made for people tall like us. I'm 6'4". Yeah, my mom's 5'11", my sister's 5'9", 5'10". I mean, so we're tall. And I think my sister's son is on his way to being my height or taller. So he had built this car business, and then he kind of retired. And then the Great American Insurance Company came to him and said, all right, we really need you to look at our books and this and that. He was like, look, I'm retired. He's like, I made my $1 million that I wanted to make, and I just want to enjoy my family and enjoy the money that I made. And they kind of reeled him back. And I'm sure he would have found a way back into, business.
Right.
But he said, I will do this if you just leave me alone and let me make these decisions. And they were like, fine. So before long,
that's amazing though. I love that story, because I feel like that is the greatest generation. I mean, I hate that, like, it's gone downhill, but that is such a great name for that generation. Yeah, we're like they couldn't even name us Gen X. Right. Like, what is it? They really were these, like, they persevered and made shit happen.
They sure did.
They got it was hard for everybody. It was such.
And he grew up during the Depression. I mean, as did my grandmother, who I never really knew. She died. She had a stroke when I was a year and a half. She was 50. She had epilepsy and grand mal seizures, and my mom used to tell me just horrible stories about how she would have to hold her tongue or put something in her mouth. I mean, just really traumatic stuff for a kid to go through. Yeah. But Jean, her name was Frances, and Jean was driven to turn this company around. And what they ended up doing was finding companies that were struggling, and he would either buy them and break them up, or he was kind of a nice Gordon Gekko, or he would buy them and turn them around. And and the biggest thing that they did was they owned the Man Chinese Theater, which was Grauman's. So this company bought the Grauman's Chinese, and my grandfather, as the president, would how they have the handprints, and he would, I think there's a picture of him with Sophia Loren, I might not have the star right, but they were no longer just an insurance company. And so I love this. My grandfather was like, we need to change our name because we're not an insurance company. He's like, National General. No one will know what it is.
Yeah.
Who cares? They did really, really well. And in 1966, they bought the Chargers, and then they bought the franchise to be named, which became the Supersonics in Seattle.
Wow.
So he fell in love with football, quickly. He was, I think, a baseball guy. I Google him from time to time, and it's interesting. I've been watching 1980s football games, because they're they're just on YouTube. It's nuts.
Yeah.
And, you know, he'll appear and it's like, it really gets me, you know. I'm like, hey, Laura, wake up, look, well, there he is. To suddenly like hear interviews or see him, it is a kind of a neat thing. But I loved that he stuck with the Chargers and he bought everyone out and he was like, this is my thing. This is what I want to do. And so I'm, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I'm going to training camp. And there's a picture somewhere of me with there were 2 general managers. We had Johnny Sanders and Tank Younger, who was a Los Angeles Ram, and he was a Tank. He was like but the sweetest guy. So my grandfather would basically kind of hand me to Tank, and you know, it was always a question whether or not I would end up with a football at the end of my week or 2, you know, hanging out. And I always wanted one. And I always wanted just a new football, but it was incredible. And the sad truth is that I don't think I realized how fortunate I was until much, much later. And I was probably annoying and I was probably a little bit of a brat and I probably threw around, you know, I can be here because my grandfather, And as a matter of fact, I remember a conversation that my grandfather had with me. I'll never forget it. He was like practicing his golf swing and I was terrified. And he's like, I got to talk to you, as he's like practicing his golf swing. He's like, did you remember going into our trainer's room? Talking to our head trainer? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, you used my name when he said you shouldn't be in there. And he's like, you can never, ever do that again. I mean, it was a real awakening. My parents, or my mom, I should say, was not as focused as, you know, certainly not as focused as we are. I'm sure we could all write books about how our parents, I don't know what that generation should be called, the greatest taking care of myself generation. I don't know. But I mean, great people, love them to pieces, but they just, whatever, they were not. So I was able to hang out with a guy named Rolf Benershka, who was our kicker, and shag balls or, you know, whatever. And it was just so much fun. And then and we used to get to the stadium like so early. And so that my grandfather could do whatever work he needed to do in his office and also watch the early games. By the way, it's not like there was NFL Sunday ticket.
No, yeah.
You know, it's not like you could just watch all the games.
Right.
For example, I remember we were playing Kansas City, and it wasn't on in LA. We had to go to NBC in Burbank, which is just so crazy because I remember then driving through as an actor to test for a role just weird. But anyway, we were using their satellite so we could see the game. And I think my grandfather was in Kansas City, but we got to go because we were whatever related.
That's awesome.
But there were some memories that I will cherish forever. And this is a kind of a nutty story. So I have Crohn's disease, and it started off with colitis. Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are the 2 major forms of inflammatory bowel disease, and it can be a pretty serious thing. And especially, I was diagnosed at 15. I don't know how graphic you want this to
whatever
be.
You want to share, you can share.
But I was bleeding and I was 15, and in an area that you don't like to talk about, and you see blood there, and you're like, I'm dying, kind of thing. But let's go back.
I'm used to this. I'm just sorry.
Sure. Well, right.
I'm sorry.
We only have one.
I know.
We have an exit. But actually 2, but whatever. Going back now, I'm 7 years old. So the kickers used to come out first, and I just couldn't. First of all, I couldn't wait till 12. The game started at 1, but at 12, the fans started coming in, and we knew that we had to be back in Papa, is what we call them. Papa's suite or boxes by noon, because then, people started coming in, and it was, quote unquote, we wanted to be safe and looked after. So my sister and I used to run around the stadium. She would roller skate down like the walkways. I would run 40-yard dashes. Stupid access for a kid. And back then it was like people weren't paying the kind of attention to kids that they do now. But the kickers were the first, the special teams were the first guys to come out. And I would always look for Rolf. And one game, I noticed that some other kicker had walked out. And I said to my mom, I was like, Mom, where's Rolf? And she said, I want to talk to you. She said, Rolf got very, very sick, and we think he's going to be okay. She explained this whole thing where I don't know how much of this she actually explained, but I had come to learn that his colon perforated on a flight back from New England. He had ulcerative colitis. And he was so sick, and he didn't want to raise concern because he didn't want his job. And I can actually really relate to this. He didn't want to lose his job. And so he kind of kept it under wraps until suddenly there's an ambulance waiting as this charter plane pulls up. He nearly died. He lost all this blood, and he started a blood drive in San Diego that I don't know if they still do it, but there's a picture in his book called Alive and Kicking where my step grandmother, who's now she's my grandmother in my heart. I mean, she's still alive. I love her to pieces. There's a picture of her giving blood, and the city of San Diego does this Rolf Benershka annual blood drive for him. But I was very scared for him. And when it was explained to me that he had a bag attached to him, I couldn't believe that was actually a thing. 30 years later, same thing happened to me.
Oh, God.
I mean, my colon didn't perforate, but it might as well have. I was diagnosed at 15 with a version of ulcerative colitis. It was very minimal. Then I got really sick in my mid-20s. I was hospitalized. They managed to get me better. And then 13 years later, I was married. We had 2 kids, and I'll never forget. I was sitting at the foot of my bed on our bench, and I was crying, and my wife was like, "You're going to feel better. They're going to take care of you." I'm like, "I'm not coming home with this colon." And she's like, "Yes, you are. Let's not think about that." And of course, my colon was removed, and I never returned to the kind of health that I felt that I should have returned to. And I went to the Mayo Clinic where I saw a doctor who eventually moved to San Diego, which was just kind of an odd coincidence. And at UCSD, about 18 months later, after my colon was removed, he re-diagnosed me with Crohn's, so ulcerative colitis affects only the colon and only the innermost lining of the colon. Crohn's is anywhere from just inside your lips to all the way down to the bottom. And there are skip areas. It is an insidious, awful thing. I have found my health, and I knew that. So when I was sick and I was 37, Rolf called me. Because my grandmother Joyce stayed in touch, and he called me, and I was on the phone. I was crying. He's like, "Please cry." He's like, "It's really important that you get your emotions out." And I was never one to kind of shy away from my emotions, but he was so good to me that I made a promise to myself that I would pay it forward in one way or another, and I finally got healthy enough to travel to Rochester, Minnesota, and get looked at, and then get looked at again. And to be re-diagnosed with Crohn's after you think that the cure for ulcerative colitis is removal of the colon. I'm cured. Okay. So what they do is you have to wear a bag for 6 months. That was my situation. I think it varies. Depending upon the severity, of your illness when you're operated on. And all I could think about that whole time was like getting rid of that bag. It was as bad as you can imagine it to be. So what they did is they built an internal pouch that you can't see, obviously, using just my small bowel. It's called a J pouch. So it kind of like folds back in on itself. And then they use the bottom to connect to the very bottom of, my tush. And they put an opening there. And so like, where your colon is 5 feet, I have just basically about the size of, my closed hand. And it means I have to be kind of smart about when I eat, how often, and because, the whole goal for me is to stay out of the restroom. And Rolf, the fact that I was connected to this guy who is very public about his disease. He has helped so many people, and was my inspiration to become involved with various charities. And I have spoken, and I always said, after I initially got sick, is that it's so weird that it worked out like this. I swear to God, I was like, I want to be on a show that reaches kids, because kids, this is an age indiscriminate disease. And kids who get this, I want to show them that, like, you can do anything you want. You have to pay attention when you're sick. You have to pay attention to, take your medicines. A lot of times we want to believe that we are well so much that when we are well, which is called remission, same as like a cancer, a lot of people stop taking their medication because they think, it's been years and I'm fine. And then they get very, very sick. And it's, so I was able to do just that. I got on a Disney show, and after the first season, we were a success. And we can come back to that.
First of all, when you're telling me about, getting reconnected with Rolf when you're in the hospital, it's like a movie of the week. It's like,
I know.
Yeah.
It's what I have been writing the same book, for the past 15 years, which is how long, or no, gosh, it's been 16, maybe 15 years. Yeah. It's been a long time. But I'm very grateful to Rolf, and it does feel like a movie of the week. It does feel like, or like an after school special.
And before we move on to all the fun stuff that we still want to talk about, how is your health now?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. There's a whole new, I'm sure you've seen it all over the news. There's like this revolution now in medicine with these biologic medications. Mm-hmm. So biologic medications, I believe, specifically target they're immunomodulators. So this is an immune misfire, basically, that's happening within me. It's part genetic, and then it's part, they don't know, maybe an allergen, maybe something, but they've zeroed in very recently, like in the last couple of weeks, on what the genetic sort of mishap is that we all have. And, the reason why I say an allergen is because I had a long talk with my doctor who was at the Mayo Clinic, who was like the guy. He's so smart. I didn't ever think like I would be able to like communicate with him and have him be able to understand him. But he worked very quickly, and he spoke, and I would kind of catch a word here or catch a phrase there or this or that. And one of the things he told me was that we have people in Japan who live a clean lifestyle and exercise and eat fish and vegetables, and they come to the States and their disease, the switch is turned on. Zeroing in on that is a big deal. And so, to get back to your original question, I have found the cocktail that works right for me. I have my good days and bad days, but I can work, I can exercise, I can be a present father and husband. Having an immune related disease can make you feel different than others, such as, I get very tired sometimes.
Yeah.
I can push through just about anything, but I might need to rest for a couple days.
I mean, that's the hard part. That because I do have a couple of friends with autoimmune, and I do have a few friends with Crohn's, and I know that it's so it's because it's inflammatory, right? Mm-hmm. You're in pain, it's uncomfortable.
That's right.
It really takes a whole wear on your body, and it's like I have so many friends who didn't find out till later. And as you said, it's indiscriminate. And I think there's definitely some genetic markers perhaps, but it's definitely it happens to women, it happens to men, it happens to kids. So I think it's really brave to kind of come out and talk about it, because it is one of those, I don't even like calling, disease, disorder, but it is something that people go through that, there's a stigma. You just don't want to talk about it because it feels like, oh, I don't want to know about that,
No, I was just going to say, on the heels of, what you were talking about with, being stigmatized, and as little as 5 years ago, there were 150,000 people in the United States who were diagnosed with IBD, inflammatory bowel disease. Now there's close to 2 million. Right. I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think that people, and nor do I think that suddenly all these people were diagnosed. I just don't think people like to talk about it.
That's it.
I think that people have suffered in silence.
Yep.
I think that people have, and it is, when you talk about pain, it's the kind of pain that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. We don't look sick. Often when we're our sickest, we look our best because we've lost a bunch of weight or whatever it is. It's just this crazy, it's rough, and it's roughest for the kids. And I was in this position of, okay, look, if I disclose, because you're not going to find many actors who disclose that they have IBD, and I know some who are planning to disclose, and they're really taking their time, which is great. But it was, I guess, a risk I was willing to take. I have to remind myself of that when there's nothing but crickets, and my phone isn't ringing, but that's also just the nature of the business that I'm in. I can't just, claim that it's because I have Crohn's disease that I'm not working. But, when you receive emails from like you have no idea what this did for my daughter, it gave her such hope and strength. You're like, okay, so what do I want my legacy to be? That I was the dad on a Disney show, and that I then was on like Breaking Bad or whatever? Or do you want to be known as someone who actually really made a difference in people's lives? And it's it becomes a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But there is this thing that, we have to make a living.
I mean, I think I mentioned to you that my sister also suffers from Crohn's, and
I'm sorry to hear it.
And it's something that not a lot of people know about, and they don't understand it. You tell somebody you have cancer or you have this, something they've heard of, they're like, oh, that's horrible.
Sure.
But when they don't know Crohn's, what does that mean? You just have to go to the bathroom?
Right.
And it's debilitating, and it's really, it's suffering. And I totally can relate to what you're saying as being an actor. You just don't want to put anything out there that could limit your hamstring. I mean, it's such a cutthroat.
Yeah, it's hard enough. It's hard enough.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I totally get it. And I do remember, seeing on social media or seeing something where you were, kind of championing the cause for the first time. I'd seen that and thinking, wow, that's brave. And this must, not only are you suffering from it, but putting it first and putting the word out there to you basically means more to you than, not that your career doesn't mean something to you, but this is how important it is to you, kind of thing. So
first of all, I really appreciate your saying those kind things. And for me, the validation came, and it came quickly, and my inbox was, for a time, I was on the cover of the National Institutes of Health. I guess they had a quarterly magazine called, oh gosh, I'm forgetting. I'll remember it later tonight when I'm falling asleep, I'm sure. But they had just my face and then the word Crohn's, and I'm like, okay, this is it. There's no doubt that I have this. And, the truth is, look, if you're a casting director, or you're a producer, and actor A is terrific, but so is actor B. Actor A and checks all the boxes or whatever, looks and da-da-da-da-da. Actor A has Crohn's, actor B doesn't. Who do you think they're going to pick? I mean, it doesn't take, a rocket scientist to say, we're going to pick the person who's going to, offer us as little, as few issues as possible. But the truth of the matter is I never missed a day of work. There have been days that have been difficult, but, no one knew. I think, one day I was a couple minutes late to a rehearsal just because I was rushing to and from the bathroom. But, okay.
I think that's the kicker, though. I feel like people give, in your head, you think you're going to be punished, but then like people give allowances for much lesser things.
Sure.
Drug abuse and like, you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I can only surmise that this crosses people's minds, but it's out of my hands. There's already so much that's out of my hands. Why don't I take control of this one thing? Why don't I make a decision for me and for anyone out there who who watches the show? Or that's a Disney show that I was on called Liv and Maddie. And
tell us I want to know.
Following. I want to get into that.
Let's do it.
I want to tell you a couple of things that I picked up that I just want to say. I mean, I think that you're right on the surface about what you said about, on the surface, actor A, actor B, they're going to go with the guy who, doesn't have Crohn's because maybe it's less of a risk.
I mean, you would think.
There's a bravery in what you've done, and there's a respect that I can only have for you, and I would assume other people the same. And you're a trailblazer. You're letting people know that if you're an actor, that you suffer from this, it's okay to come out and talk about it. You can have a career. So I don't know, on the surface, yes, but underneath, I think there's a lot more. And I think what you did is really brave and really commendable.
Thank you.
And I'm glad to see, it seems like you're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Let's get into the fun stuff. I mean, let's talk about it.
All right. Let's do it.
We talked about your grandfather owning the Chargers. I remember you from El Rodeo. Beverly High, I'm a freshman, you're a senior, you're the lead in The Crucible, you're the lead in The Music Man, which was no small feat. I mean, singing, dancing, all of it, right?
Yeah.
And then, I don't know much what happens to you, and, obviously went to UCSB, but I'm in the movie theater. I think I went to the premiere of Lethal Weapon 4.
Oh my God. Lethal Weapon 4, right.
Barry Bruckheimer's stepdaughter. I went to the premiere of Lethal Weapon 4, and there's Ben King, the cop, right?
Yeah.
So I know now that you are pursuing, it wasn't just a high school thing, you're pursuing the acting bug, right?
Yes.
You're kicking around on different sitcoms, and then you get on, after a number of years, get on Liv and Maddie, right?
Yes.
Which is kind of, I mean, I don't know if it's just because I had kids, or, I was a little bit friendly with Dave DeLuise, but it's the heights of Hannah Montana's wrapping up.
Yeah.
Wizards of Waverly Place is in their, heyday. They're in their stride. And now here comes Liv and Maddie with Ben King. Yeah. Right. And by the way, and my kids were about, right at that age, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 3 kids. And I'm like, I went to high school with that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I love hearing about it. I would hesitate to say here comes Liv and Maddie with Ben King. When you're a dad on a Disney show and it's a family show, I was kind of like, run in, say a joke, here's the basketball guys, have fun and take off. Originally the show was, so just to back up a little bit, I had a good deal of success with guest stars, recurs or whatever. I was on a David E. Kelly show that I thought was going to be great. It was not a good show, but we had so much fun doing it. And
I probably watched it.
It was called The Wedding Bells. I mean, it was so, I don't know.
They're not all winners, David E. Kelly.
No, and it's just to go from that back to like, okay, you park on the street and you're going to walk 4 blocks and then the casting office, like you get really used to the idea of like, oh, I'm going to be, in my my great dressing room with the, direct TV that has all, watching Laker games when I'm not on set, doing scenes. And we had an amazing cast, and that ended so abruptly. I remember calling my agent. We were in the middle of shooting episode 7. Literally, we were turning around a scene. We were turning around So you shoot one side, you get your master, you shoot one side, and then you got to come around. Everything's got to be cleared out. When they walked on stage and canceled the show, they were like, we're still trying to figure out if they want us to do all 13 so they could sell it overseas or whatever. But I just remember calling my agent, who had said to me that they were talking about me for some comedy, which is my thing. And I was like, please call them back and tell them I'm available right now. And he's like, yeah, they just cast it. And because it was like, just as Wedding Bells was ending, so was pilot season, which used to be a thing. It's not really anymore. But I did have a taste of success and what it was like. Working on the Disney Channel is very different, especially as a dad. They really couldn't care much less about the dad. The mom means something. And it makes sense because kids are comfortable when the mom is around, dad can be at work, dad can be on a trip, da 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 da. And I remember that early on they were like, so we want to sort of downgrade you from a series regular to a recur because we've got so many guest stars, the kids have friends and all this stuff. And I was like, not really feeling it, let's part ways if we're going to do that. And they're like, no. So this was like 3 years of this. And, but before that, it was called Bits and Pieces. And what they tried to do, which was a bold attempt, was to, we were a blended family, think like Brady Bunch, but Disneyfied. They only pick like just the really funny parts of the scenes, which in theory is a kind of a fun idea, but no one could tell who was from what parents. And like, it was very confusing for the kids when they tested it, but they liked the cast. They wanted to do something. And then they're like, well, we've always wanted to do a twins show. I didn't know any of this. So when you do a pilot, they hold you for 6 months. They can hold you for 6 months. It's the craziest thing when you test for a show just before you walk in to read for, the head of the network, all the top brass. They make you sign your contract, which is like they could have put, Greek, Aramaic, I don't know, and I would have signed it. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I just trust that my lawyer got it right, and whatever, just tell me where to sign. I mean, it was a really messed up way, just the whole process. But I really enjoy and still enjoy auditioning, which is very rare because we tape ourselves now. But when the stakes are really high, that's when I feel like I'm at my best. I just feel like, I was like born in the theater at Beverly. Like, that was no joke. The Beverly Hills Theater Department.
No, it wasn't.
No, you had some. I mean, listen, Gabe Mock was your year too, or a year behind you.
He was a year behind me, and we were really good friends. Yeah. And I'm in touch with him, and couldn't be more proud. There couldn't be a more deserving guy. He's a hard worker and a sweet guy.
Gabe was a nice guy. Gabe was always a nice
guy.
Guy.
Yeah, like the most handsome and the nicest ever. And
my ex-wife used to call him Gabe the Babe.
Yeah, great. Right. He was at my bar mitzvah. I said, because I got 2 daughters. But doing that, just to sort of put a cap on that, like, I had 2 daughters, and they were, I think, 8 and 6 when I got the show. So this would have been on their playlist anyway. Right. To be on a show that my kids would have been watching anyway. It's not like CSI. It's not, it's not Breaking Bad. It's not there's stuff that I couldn't show them now. They're young adults, basically. I just was thrilled to have an opportunity. And plus, like, we were given, all the perks, we were given passes to Disneyland and 8 tickets and a guide once a year. So we would bring other families a couple times. I was on the show for 3 seasons. It went for 4 seasons. It was a really happy, special time that I wouldn't change for anything.
There's nothing better than when your kids look at you like that's There's nothing better.
No, it was incredible. It was
It's
really, really special.
Jess and I don't know if you know who John Homa is. He's an acting coach, but Jess, he was on General Hospital on set for a number of years, and Jess and I just recently had him on, and we were talking to him about, like daytime fame. If you're on a daytime soap opera, it's different than like network primetime fame. I think Disney fame is similar to that. But when you have young kids, tell us about, you went to go visit your daughter at college.
Yeah, so there was her sorority, A Phi, I think, Alpha Phi, and they were having a dad-daughter weekend, and there was a darty. I don't know if you've heard of what this is, but it's a daytime party.
What's it called? A darty?
Yeah, darty.
Yeah, it's a party during the day. Any reason to drink and have fun. I had met some of her friends, but I was really excited to go and meet, some of her other friends. And we went to this party, and of course there's a DJ, and it's by a lake. The weather was perfect. Everything was great. And I kicked, no idea, but like almost tripped and fell on my face. But there was a cord that went over to the DJ booth. And of course I tripped over it, and all the sound was like, like, the full record scratch, and there's no music, and everyone's looking at me, and I'm like, sorry, I am so sorry. And like I'm sitting there trying to, fix everything, but it's not like you put it back together and then, the disc starts turning and the computer has to reboot. Where's the music? Who's the guy that knocked out the power? But something happened in there where all these girls who were in the sorority noticed me and were like, it's a very easy, we call it getting L and M'd. Dad, you're getting L and M. Dad, you're getting L and M. And it's very easy because first they see you, then they look up the show and they get your name. And the first thing is, are you Benjamin King? Were you on a show? And And so
but your entrance was straight out of the Disney show. Like,
and it was a full Chevy Chase.
Like,
such a dork move. And
like, wait, isn't that the dad from that show we watched when we were 10? I mean, that is classic.
Right.
Oh my! You enacted exactly who you were. I love it.
I'm not exactly sure of the timing of all of it, but it certainly lined up exactly like that, or it felt like it did. And I was mortified. But what followed was an endless line of people who wanted to take selfies with me, which I love doing. The only problem is I only had so much time with my daughter and her friends. And eventually it was like, she was like, I always check with them, to make sure that, are you cool? Is this all right? Because if not, we'll end it right now. Yeah. And she's like, no, you're good. And like, she went to college. She never mentioned a word to anybody that I was on, on the show. And like, she wanted friends, and I totally respect it. Whereas like I was the kid who wore Chargers everything all the time, and here's just this like mature young woman who was like, I'm going to meet friends my way. Yeah. And like, she got shit from her friends. Like some of her friends are like, how come you didn't tell us? Like, and she just, I think it became another endearing factoid just about who she is. But anyway, at this party, it was just on and on. Finally, I look at her and I'm just like, it's not going to stop. And she's like, let's get out of here. So all of her friends and I just left. And what that meant was that
I took a crew of college girls. This is the best.
Right.
The best ever.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a happily married man.
But I mean, like, I love that.
But let me tell you, if you're going to if your fame is going to be used for anything or notoriety for anything, like, a sorority, like an entire sorority paying attention to you. And like the other dads are standing around like, they have no idea. They're like, why? What's the deal with that guy? So and these girls are like my daughter's age. I'm like, what do you like? Just go. Like, what are you doing? Not that there was anything,
No,
nefarious.
but I know. I know what you
It's
mean.
hysterical, though. It's great. It's awesome. I
Oh,
love it.
so
It's
funny.
just it's just more for the book that I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
in my little file in my
Kudos
desk
to your
in my
daughter
room.
for not, feeling she had to use that or even want to tell anybody about it. But then, like, the drop on her sorority, baller.
Total baller move.
Yeah.
So proud of her.
That's great.
You know,
And
my
it's-
kids are awesome. I can say that. I have amazing children, and my wife is, I like to say I married up. She was raised by people who paid attention to her and were so consistent and so there. My parents, they broke up, and there were sort of a lot of different kind of people in and out of my life, and I didn't know who, like, if my mom was serious about this particular person who was telling me that I was eating French fries, like an animal, and slow down, or did I need to be listening to him? Are we going to marry this guy? Or, like, it was very kind of confusing. And Laura had a mom and dad who loved each other incredibly and who loved their children and loved being parents. And you can see it just in the way that she raises our kids. And I say raises our kids.
sweet.
Of course, I'm in on it too, but I'm often like, is that okay? Was I good? Oh no? Okay. So, okay. Got it. Like, I'm checking with her,
As somebody who follows you on social media, I can feel the love that you guys have for each other.
Oh yeah.
But
I'm constantly asking them, is this okay? Is this okay? No, like, some girls are very specific.
Very specific.
Yes.
Did your wife grow up here in LA?
Yeah, she went to Brentwood and then uni.
That's where I kind of went to college, but I only went to college there because one of my best friends went, and I would go to class with her and insert myself in the conversations.
That's
they would
fun.
actually think that I went to college there. But I knew all her friends. We kind of make a joke that, like, I was like the unofficial, like, U of A.
I think that's fantastic.
U of A was the best college experience I had. I went to Santa Barbara for a year. And but like Santa Barbara City. And then I took my college
Did you stay at FT?
Was like, I sure did. I lived in a dorm room with my ex-boyfriend, which is not a normal thing for most kids.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was not. It was like weird. Like, we were like married couple. It was not cohesive to college. College was like a weird, like, I had my own. That
was your time to grow up.
I had panic disorder. So that was one of those things that nobody talked about until 20 years later. And you're like,
of course,
that's a thing. Like, it's a real fucking, like, I thought I was going crazy, which was really not a fun place to be. So
sorry to hear that.
But so, college was fun, and then it wasn't.
For me, college was, Santa Barbara's 90 minutes away. Far enough so I didn't have to come in for Sunday dinner or whatever, but I could come in for Passover, or, if that my mom had a gallery. So, she had a great opening, she represented lots of great, she and her partner, great photographers, and like Linda McCartney and Herb Ritz and Joel Peter Whitkin, and just on and on. And so the shows, I would bring my friends to the shows, and, but I liked being away, and I liked being close enough. And I'm a California boy at heart. Yeah. I love the ocean. I'm not a surfer, but I was like a water ski instructor in camp. And I don't know. I love the water. Even the faint smell of tar that seemed to emanate through Isla Vista. And my dad used to say, "Oh, so you leave the windows open to let the flies out of your apartment." Sure. I just loved it. My second year, we lived on Del Playa, which is the street. I think that's what it means in Spanish, of the beach or of the ocean. And we were on the second floor, and we just looked right out into the ocean. It was unbelievable. I remember my brother had a friend, his name was Michael Carter, and he said, I was a sophomore, and I asked him where he goes to college. He's like, I go to UC Santa Barbara. I was like, what's that like? He's like, well, I live on the beach. And I was like, say that again? He's like, I live on the beach and I ride my bike to class. I'm like, that's where I want to go to school. I got in, Hail Mary, got lucky, very lucky. I found out I was burnt out on acting when I graduated high school. I had acted. So I also did Equus in the spring of my senior year. And there were 2 festivals that I had prepared really hard for and that we actually won. My scene partner, Jenny Gordon, we did, I think the Shakespeare was in the fall. And then in the spring we had the DTASC, Drama Teachers Association of Southern California. And there were like 100 schools. It was crazy number of schools participating. And it was kind of like, it just burnt me out. I loved it, but I was like, I don't really think I'm going to be an actor. I think I'm going to be a lawyer like my dad. Put me in front of a jury. I could convince anyone of anything. Of the 4 kids, I have 2 step siblings and then a full blood sibling. And my parents used to say I stood up for children's rights. Like I would always step in and argue a case for whomever, and I just sort of had that in me. But I fell asleep in my law and society class, the first one. It was so boring. And I was like, I can't. I can do the jury thing. Great. Tom Cruise and what is that? Few Good Men. Thank you. But so I kind of was like, okay, I could be an English major. I had just really started. I did not like to read. The summer before my freshman year in college, I finished my first book, and that was like, okay, I enjoy this. I'm really this is going to be fun. Like I'm going to be reading books, and I still read books. And my daughter and she'll pick a book, and I'll have a book, and we like to just sit and read. Now she's in Wisconsin, so sometimes we'll do it, over FaceTime, and she's here now, so it's just a neat thing. But anyway, I was like, so okay, I'll do English. Yeah. I'll do English. This was my sophomore year. I was riding my bike through the drama department just to check it out. And I noticed that there were signups for auditions for senior BFA direct. So there was a BFA play directing, and there were signups for that. I was like, that's cool. Like a 1-act play. That sounds like fun. And I was now a couple years removed, or a year and a half removed, from my whirlwind of a senior year in high school. And I got cast as a lead in this show called A Fire in the Basement. And the acting, this is kind of like a humble brag, but the acting teacher came up to me after the show and said, so, we have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting class, in acting here, right? And I said, yeah, I did. I do know that. And she said, well, we can use your performance in this show as an audition, and we're invited to come and be a part of it if it's something that you want. I mean, I said yes on the spot, but what that meant was that I would be graduating a year after all my buddies. It was fine. But I like to say I graduated in 93, even though I really graduated in 94. I think one of my friends from the theater department was, because I posted on Facebook that I graduated in 93, just because I wanted people to remember me if they wanted to find me, back when I gave a shit about who would find me on Facebook, right? And he's like, I graduated in 94 with you. I'm pretty sure you were. And I was like, okay, all right. So I changed it. I like to think of that Bachelor of Fine Arts program at UC Santa Barbara, the acting program, as like a little, just like a hidden jewel. They cut people if they're not up to snuff every quarter. I don't know if they still do that. I know that they did. And I'm involved with this department. They give awards, and in 1990, at the end of the year, they give awards to mostly the seniors who are leaving for various things. And my favorite professor and director, his name was Robert Egan, and he actually came to LA, and I produced with him, and he directed 2 David Mamet 1-act plays that I was fortunate that I starred in. and we got a really good cast together, and he directed, and then he got really sick and he passed away from lymphoma. I started a gift. I can't really call it. It is technically a scholarship, but it's more like hey, here's a chunk of money for a graduating senior who wants to be an actor, because you're going to need headshots. You're going to need, put a down payment on an apartment if you're going to come to LA and you're going to do it. So there's all these parameters that our winner every year has to sort of the boxes that need to be checked. And it keeps me, first of all, and most important, it keeps Bob's name alive in that department. And I think it needs to be, because what he did for that department, and for me particularly, he changed my life. And I talked earlier about not knowing if I was smart enough to have a conversation with this one doctor. That's the way I felt with Bob Egan when I took his. It was just a drama class, and it was about basically reading plays and breaking them down. And I just remember thinking, like, I mean, I'll do my best, but this guy he's so smart. Then he cast me as a lead in a show my senior year, and I just loved every minute that I got to spend with him. And I remember just throwing it around like, hey, maybe when I'm settled down in LA, you'll come down and direct. And he was like, Ben, I want to do that. And he was like, I could tell he was dead serious. And I was like, well, okay. So cut to 4 years later, we had been in touch, and we would meet in Camarillo, and we would share plays. He just put together, we used the set designer from UC Santa Barbara. He found costume designer, and like, it was just a overwhelming success. Man, that was one of the most fun things. It was probably the most fun I've ever had acting.
It's awesome to hear that you were so involved not only with your theater department, all you're doing for Crohn's. I mean, let me ask you a couple questions so we can wrap it up. First of all, it's awesome to hear all that you're doing with the theater department, that you're so involved. Is there something, I don't know if there's something to plug with that, or if you want to talk about if people want to contribute to theater needs support?
That's such a great question. And I wish I had a way to, what I would say is connecting to cure Crohn's and colitis is where I would say I would ask for donations, because I have seen firsthand what people who have never been in a forum with other people who are sick. It's like the same tenets of AA, in a sense that, like, we have this disease, we can be here to help one another, and like the bonds are so strong. But connecting to cure Crohn's and colitis, my dear friend, oh my God, Stacy Dillon, she's just amazing, and she runs this incredible. They've raised, I think, like over $3 million for research, and she handpicks where the money goes. And her son was diagnosed basically when he was like 2 or 3 or 4 months, like just crazy early. That's where I would ask anybody who wants to donate. You don't even have to say it's because you saw Ben King, having a conversation about his crazy intestines or intestine. But C2C, connecting to cure.com or .org. connectingtocure.org.
It's been awesome catching up with you.
You guys are awesome.
Honestly,
it's a pleasure.
The nicest guy growing up. Yeah. Nothing has changed.
Thank you.
I feel like there's so much that we didn't even touch on.
I agree. In a year,
I may hit you up again for a round 2.
Totally.
I'd be happy to.
Ben, and you know what the best part about doing this is we get to like reconnect with people that we really like and find out that like their cousin's one of your favorite people. All of those things. I appreciate you being super vulnerable, telling us a little bit about your journey, which is super important for other people to hear. I think the more people are aware and hear themselves being spoken about and see themselves in you is super helpful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on. It's
my pleasure. It's absolutely my pleasure.
So everyone who's listening or watching, we can send them to c2c.org.
I think it's connectingtocure.org.
Connectingtocure.org.
Cure.org. Yes.
This is Benjamin King. You could maybe find some reruns on the Disney Channel of your favorite shows, Liv and Maddie and Waverly Place. And if you'd like to continue to watch us and follow us and hit like, we're on all the platforms. And until next time, this has been 90who10. Peace out.